I'm going to be reading to you Stave 4 of A Christmas Carol. I honestly am completely surprised at how well this story has stood up. And good news, by the way, I do have some tea, so I'll be reading at least a consistent speed. And I am playing some nice jazz for those who are currently listening to it live, and for those who are not. I'm playing some nice fireplace ASMR too. That way you can really enjoy it, darling. So, please do enjoy yourself and get ready for the wonderful ASMR ride. Stave 4, The Last of the Spirits. The phantom slowly and gravely, silently approached. When it came, Scrooge bent down upon his knee, for in the very air through which the spirit moved, it seemed to scatter gloom and mystery. Oh, welcome, May. Do enjoy yourself. It was shrouded in a deep black garment, and Cane, which concealed its head, its face, its form, and left nothing of it visible save one outstretched hand. But it was for this it would have been difficult to detach its figure from the night, and separate it from the darkness by which it was surrounded. He felt that it was tall and stately when it came beside him, and that its mysterious presence filled him with a solemn dread. He knew no more, for the spirit neither spoke nor moved. "I am in the presence of the ghost of Christmas yet to come," said Scrooge. The spirit answered not, but pointed onward with its hand. "You are about to show me shadows of things that have not happened, but will in a time before us," Scrooge pursued. "Is that so, spirit?" The upper portion of the garment was contracted for an instant in its folds, as if the spirit had inclined its head. That was the only answer he received. Though well used to its ghostly company by this time, Scrooge feared the silent shape so much that his legs trembled beneath him, and he found that he could hardly stand when he prepared to follow it. The spirit pauses a moment by observing his condition and giving him time to recover. But Scrooge was all the worse for this. It thrilled him with a vague, uncertain horror to know that behind the dusky shroud there were ghostly eyes intently fixed upon him, while he, though he stretched his own to the utmost, could see nothing but a spectral hand and one great heap of black. "The ghost of the future," he exclaimed, "I fear you more than any spectre I have seen, but as I know your purpose is to do me good, and as I hope to live to be another man from what I was, I am prepared to bear you company, and do it with a thankful heart. You will not speak to me." It gave him no reply. The hand was pointed straight before them. "Lead on," said Scrooge. "Lead on. The night is waning fast, and it is precious time to me. I know. Lead on, spirit." The phantom moved away as it had come towards him. Scrooge followed in the shadow of its dress, which bore him up, he thought, and carried him along. They scarcely seemed to enter the city, for the city seemed to spring up about them and encompass them in its own act. But there they were, in the heart of it, unchanged, amongst the merchants, who hurried up and down and chinked the money in their pockets and conversed in groups and looked at their watches and trifled thoughtfully with their great gold seals and so forth, as Scrooge had seen them often. The spirit stopped beside one little knot of businessmen. Observing that the hand was pointed to them, Scrooge advanced to listen to their talk. "No," said the great fat man with a monstrous chin. "I don't know much about it. Either way, I only know he's dead." "When did he die?" inquired another. "Last night, I believe." "What was that the matter with him?" asked a third, taking a vast quantity of snuff out of a very large snuff-box. "I thought he'd never die." God knows," said the first with a yawn. "What has he done with his money?" asked the red-faced gentleman of the pendulous expressions on the end of his nose that shook like the gills of a turkey cock. "I haven't heard," said the man with the large chin, yawning again. "Left it to his company, perhaps. He hasn't left it to me, that's all I know." This pleasantry was received with a general laugh. "It's likely to be a very cheap funeral, for upon my life I don't know of anybody to go to it. Suppose we make it up a party and volunteer." "I don't mind going if lunch is provided," observed the gentleman with the excretions on his nose, "but I must be fed if I make one." Another laugh. "Well, I'm the most disinterested among you, after all," said the first speaker, "for I never wear black gloves, I never eat lunch, but I'll offer to go if anybody else will. When I come to think of it, speakers and listeners strolled away and mixed with other groups. Scrooge knew the men and looked towards the spirit for an explanation. The phantom glided onto the street. Its finger pointed towards two persons meeting. Scrooge listened again, thinking that the explanation might lie there. He knew these men also perfectly. They were the men of a business, very wealthy and of great importance. He had made a point always in standing well in their esteem, in a business point of view, that is, strictly in a business point of view. "How are you?" said one. "How are you?" returned the other. "Well," said the first, Old Scratch has got his own at last, hey?" "So I am told," returned the second. "Cold, isn't it? Seasonable for the Christmas time. You're not a skater, I suppose?" No, something else to think of. Good morning." Not another word. That was their meaning, their conversation, their parting. No, it wasn't a business. It was A-Y-E. So I'd honestly never heard that in terms of writing, but it seems to be a bit interesting. Not another word. That was their meeting, their conversation, their parting. Scrooge was at first inclined to be surprised that the spirit should attach importance to conversations apparently so trivial, but feeling assured that they must have some hidden purpose, he set himself to consider what it was likely to be. They could scarcely be supposed to have any bearing on the death of Jacob, his old partner, for that was past, and this ghost province was for the future. Nor could he think of anyone immediately connected with himself to whom he could apply them, but nothing doubting that, to whomsoever they applied, they had some latent moral for his own improvement. He resolved to treasure up every word he heard, and everything he saw, especially to observe the shadow of himself when it appeared, for he had an explanation that the conduct of his future self would give him the clue he missed, and would render the solution of these riddles easy. He looked about in that very place for his own image, but another man stood in his accustomed corner, and though the clock pointed towards the usual time of day of being there, he saw no likeness of himself among the multitudes that poured in for the porch. It gave him little surprise, however, for he had been revolving in his mind a change of life, and thought and hoped he saw his new-born resolutions carried out in this. Quiet and dark, beside him stood the phantom with its outstretched hand. When he roused himself from his thoughtful quest, he fancied from the turn of the hand, and his situation in reference to himself, that the unseen eyes were looking at him keenly. It made him shudder and feel very cold. They left the busy scene and went into the obscure part of town, when Scrooge had never penetrated before. Although he recognized its situation and its bad repute, they were obvious. The ways were foul and narrow, the shops and houses wretched, the people half-naked, drunken, slipshod, ugly, alleyways and archways, like so many cesspools, disgorged of their offenses of smell and dirt and life. Upon the straggling streets, the whole quarter reeked with crime, with filth and misery. Far from the den of this infamous resort, there were the low-browed, beetling shop, Below a penthouse roof were iron, old rags, bottles, bones, and greasy offal were brought. Upon the floor within were piled up heaps of rusty keys, nails, chains, hinges, files, scales, weights, and refuse iron of all kinds. Secrets that few liked to scrutinize were bred and hidden in mountains of unseemly rags, masses of corrupted fat, septules of bones, sitting in among the wares he dealt in, by charcoal stove made of brick or old bricks, and gray-haired rascal nearly 70 years of age, who had screened himself from the cold air without by a frusi containing of miscellaneous tatters, hung upon a line, and smoked his pipe in all the luxury of a calm retirement. Oh. The best kind of hobby shop. Scrooge and the Phantom came into the presence of this man, just as a woman with a heavy bundle slunk into the shop. But she had scarcely entered, for another woman, similarly laden, came in too. She was closely followed by a man in faded black, who was no less startled by the sight of them than they had been upon the recognition of each other. After a short period of blank astonishment, in which the old man with the pipe had joined them, they all three burst into laughter. "Let the chairwoman alone to be the first," cried she who had entered first. "Let the laundress alone be the second, and let the undertaker's man alone be the third. Look here, old Joe, here's a chance, if we haven't all three met here without meaning it." "You couldn't have met in a better place," said old Joe, removing his pipe from his mouth. "Come into the parlor. You were made free of it long ago, you know, and the other two aren't strangers. Stop till I shut the door of the shop. Ah, how it shrieks! There ain't a rusty bit of metal in this place, as its own hinges, I believe. I'm sure there's no such old bones here as mine." "We're all suitable to her calling. We're well matched. Come into the parlor, come into the parlor." The parlor was a space behind a screen of rags. The old man raked the fire together with an old stair rod, and having trimmed his smoky lamp with the stem of his pipe, and put it in his mouth again. While he did this, the woman who had already spoken threw her bundle on the floor and sat down in a flaunting manner on a stool, crossing her elbows on her knees, and looking with a bold defiance at the other two. "What odds, then, what odds, Mrs. Dibbler," said the woman. "Every person has a right to take care of themselves. He always did." "That's true, indeed," said the laundress. "No man more so." "Why, then, don't stand staring as if you was afraid. Woman, who's the wiser? We're not going to pick holes in each other's coats, I suppose." "No, indeed," says Mrs. Dibbler. Then the man together. "We should hope not." "Very well, then," cried the woman, "that's enough. Who's the worse for the loss of a few things like these? Not a dead man, I suppose." "No, indeed," said Mrs. Dibbler. "If he wanted to keep them after he was dead, a wicked old screw," pursued the woman. "Why wasn't he natural in his lifetime? If he had been, he'd have somebody to look after him when he is struck with death, instead of lying gasping out the last there, alone by himself." "This was the truest word that was ever spoken," said Mrs. Dibbler. "It's a judgment on him." "I wish it was a little heavier judgment," replied the woman, "and it should have been. You may depend on it. If I could have laid my hands on anything else, open that bundle, old Joe, and let me know the value of it. Speak out plain. I'm not afraid to be the first, nor am I afraid for them to see it. We know well that we were helping ourselves, and before we met, I believe. It's no sin. Open the bundle, Joe." But the gallantry of her friends would not allow this, and the man in faded black, mounting the breach first, produced his plunder. It was not extensive. A seal or two, a pencil case, a pair of sleeve buttons, a brooch of no value were all. They were severally exclaimed and appraised by old Joe, who chalked the sums he was disposed to give to each upon the wall and add them up in total, when he found there was nothing more to come. That's your account, said Joe, and I wouldn't give another 6 pence. If I was to be boiled for not doing it, who's next? Mrs. Dibbler was next. Sheets and towels, a little wearing apparel, 2 old-fashioned silver teaspoons, a pair of sugar tongs, a few boots. Her account was stated on the wall in the same manner. I always give too much to ladies. It's a weakness of mine. And that's the way I ruin myself, said old Joe. That's your account, and if you asked me for another penny and made it into an open question, I'd repent for being so liberal and knock off a half-crown. And now to undo my bundle, Joe, said the first woman. Sorry. Joe went down on his knees for greater convenience of opening it, and unfastened a great many knots, and dragged out large, heavy rolls of dark stuff. What do you call this? Said Joe. Bed curtains? Ah, returned the woman, laughing and leaning toward her crossed arms. Bed curtains. You don't mean to say you took them down, rings and all of him lying there? Said Joe. Yes, I do, replied the woman. Why not? You were born to make your fortune, said Joe, and you'll certainly do it. I certainly shan't hold my hand when I can get anything in it by reaching out, for the sake of such a man as he was. I promise you, Joe, returned the woman coolly. Don't drop that oil upon the blankets now. His blankets, asked Joe. Whose else do you think? Replied the woman. He isn't likely to take the cold without them, I dare say. I hope he didn't die of anything catching, said old Joe, stopping his work and looking up. Don't you be afraid of that, returned the woman. I ain't so fond of his company that I'd loiter about him for such things if he did. You may look for that shirt till your eyes ache, and you won't find a hole in it, nor a threadbare place. It's the best he had, and a fine one too. They've wasted it, if it hadn't been for me. What do you call wasting it? Asked old Joe. Putting it on him to be buried, to be sure, replied the woman with a laugh. Somebody was fool enough to do it, but I took it off again. If calico ain't good enough for such purpose, it isn't good enough for anything. It's quite as becoming to the body. He can't look uglier than he did with that one. Scrooge listened to this dialogue in horror, as they sat grouped about their spoil in the scantily light afforded by the old man's lamp. He viewed them with detestation and disgust, for he could hardly have been greater, though they demons. I know, it's very Christmassy, Grave Rob. Though they demons marketing the corpse itself. Laughed the same woman when old Joe, producing a flannel bag with money in it, took out several gains upon the ground. This is the end of it, you see. He frightened everyone away from him when he was alive, to profit us when he was dead. Spirit, said Scrooge, shuddering from head to foot. I see. The case of this unhappy man might be my own. My life tends to be that way. Now, merciful heaven, what is this? He recoiled in fear, for the scene had changed, and now he almost touched a bed, a bare, uncurtained bed, on which, beneath a ragged sheet, there lay something covered up, which, though it was dumb, announced itself in awful language. The room was very dark, too dark to be observed with any accuracy, though Scrooge glanced around it in obedience to a secret impulse, anxious to know what room it was. A pale light rising in the outer air fell upon the bed, and on it, plundered and bereft, unwatched, unwept, uncared for, was the body of this man. Scrooge glanced towards his phantom. Its steady hand was pointed to the head. The cover was so carelessly adjusted that the slightest raising of it, the motion of a finger upon Scrooge's part, might have disclosed the face. He thought of it, and felt how easy it would be to do so, and longed to do it. But he had no more power to withdraw the veil than to dismiss the spectre at his side. Oh, cold, cold, rigid death, set up thine altar here, and dress it up with such terrors as thou hast at thy command. for this is thy dominion. But the loved and revered and honored head, thou canst not turn one hair of thy dread purposes, or make one feature odious. It is not that the hand is heavy, and will fall down when released. It is not that the heart and pulse are still, but that the hand was open and generous and true, and the heart brave and warm and tender, and the purpose of a man strike, shadow strike, and see his good deed springing from the wound, to sow the world with life immortal. No voice produced these words in Scrooge's ears, and yet he heard them when he looked upon the bed. He thought, if this man could be raised up now, that he would be his foremost faults, avarice, hard-dealing, gripping cares. They have brought him to a rich end, truly. He lay in the dark, empty house, with not a man, a woman, or a child, to say that he was kind to me in this or that, for the memory of one word, to be kind to him. A cat was tearing at the door, and it was a sound of gnawing rats beneath the hearthstone, that they wanted in a room of death, and why were they so restless and disturbed? Scrooge did not dare to think. "Spirit," he said, "this is a fearful place. In leaving it, I shall not leave its lesson. Trust me. Let us go." Still the ghost pointed with unmoving finger to the head. "I understand you," said returned Scrooge, "and I would do it if I could, but I have not the power, Spirit. I have not the power." Again it seemed to look upon him. "If there was any person in the town who feels emotion caused by a man's death," said Scrooge, quite agonized, "show that person to me, Spirit, I beseech you." The phantom spread its dark robe before him for a moment, like a wing, and withdrawing it, revealed a room by daylight where a mother and her child were. She was expecting someone with anxious eagerness, for she walked up and down the room, starting at every corner, looked out the window, and glanced at the clock, tried, but in vain, to work with her needle, and could hardly bear the voices of children in their play. At length the long-expected knock was heard. She hurried to the door and met her husband, a man whose face was careworn and depressed. Though he was young, it was a remarkable expression in it now, a kind of serious delight of which he felt ashamed, and which he struggled to repress. He sat down to the dinner that had been boarding for him by the fire, and when she asked him faintly what news, it was not until after a long silence he appeared embarrassed how to answer. "Is it good," she said, "or bad?" "To help him. Bad," he answered. "We are quite ruined." "No, there is hope yet, Caroline." "If he relents," she said, amazed. "There is. Nothing is past hope. If such a miracle has happened." "He is past relenting," said her husband. "He is dead." She was a mild, patient creature, for her face spoke the truth, but she was thankful in her soul to hear it, and she said so with clasped hands. She prayed forgiveness the next moment, and was sorry, but the first emotion of her heart. What the half-drunken woman who I have told you of last night said to me when I tried to see him and obtain a week's delay, what I thought was a mere excuse to avoid me, turns out to be quite true. He was not only very ill, but dying, then. To whom will our debt be transferred? I don't know, but before that time we shall be ready with the money, and even though we are not, it would be a bad fortune indeed to find a merciless creditor in his successor. We may sleep tonight with light hearts, Caroline. Yes, often as they would, their hearts were lighter, their children's faces, hushed and clustered round to hear what they so little understood, were brighter, and it was a happier house for this man's death. The only emotion was that the ghost could not show him, caused by the event, was one of pleasure. "Let me see some tenderness connected with a death," said Scrooge, "and that dark chamber, Spirit, which we left just now, will be forever present to me." The ghost conducted him through several streets familiar to his feet, and as they went along, Scrooge looked here and there to find himself, but nowhere was he to be seen. They entered poor Bob Cratchit's house, the dwelling he had visited before, and found the mother and child seated by the fire, quiet, very quiet. The noisy little Cratchits were still as statues in one corner, and sat looking at Peter, who had a book before him. The mother and her daughters were engaged in sewing, but surely they were very quiet. And he took a child and set them in the midst of them. There had Scrooge heard those words. He had not dreamed them. The boy must have read them out, as he in the spirit crossed the threshold. Why did he not go on? The mother laid her work upon the table and put her hand to her face. "The color hurts my eyes," she said. "The color. Ah, poor Timmy." "They're better now again," said Cratchit's wife. "It makes them weak by candlelight, and I wouldn't show weak eyes to your father when he comes home. For the world, it must be near his time." "Past it, rather," Peter answered, shutting up his book. "But I think he has walked a little slower than he used these few last evenings, Mother." They were very quiet again. "At least," she said, in a steady, cheerful voice that only faltered once, I have only known him walk with Tiny Tim on his shoulder very fast indeed." "And so have I," cried Peter, "often." "And so have I," exclaimed another. "So had all. But he is very light to carry," she resumed, intent upon her work, "and his father loved him so that was no trouble, no trouble. And there is your father at the door." She hurried to meet him, and little Bob and his comforter. He had need of it, poor fellow, came in. His tea was ready for him on the hob, and they all tried to help him to it most. When the two young Cratchits got upon his knees and laid, each child had a little cheek against his face, as if they said, "Don't mind it, father, don't be grieved." Bob was rather cheerful with them, and spoke pleasantly to all the family. He looked at the work upon the table and praised the industry and speed of Miss Cratchit and the girls. They would be done long before Sunday, he said. "Sunday? You went today, then, Robert?" said his wife. "Yes, my dear," returned Bob. "I wish you could have gone, but it would have done you good to see how green the place is. But you'll see it often. I promised him that I'd walk there on Sunday." "My little child," Bob cried. "My little child." He broke down at once. He couldn't help it. If he could have helped it, he and his child would have been farther apart, perhaps, than they were. Let me go scroll down here. He left the room and went upstairs into the room above, which was lighted cheerfully and hung with Christmas. There was a chair set close beside the child, and there were signs of someone having been there. Lately, poor Bob sat down in it, and when he had thought a little and composed himself, he kissed the little face. He was reconciled to what had happened, and went down again quite happy. They drew about the fire and talked, the girls and mother working still. Bob told them about the extraordinary kindness of Mr. Scrooge's nephew, whom he had scarcely seen but once, and who, meeting him in the street today and seeing that he looked just a little down, you know, said Bob, inquired what had happened to distress him. "On which," said Bob, for he is the pleasantest spoken gentleman you have ever heard, I told him, "I'm heartily sorry for it, Mr. Cratchit," he said, "and heartily sorry for your good wife. And by the by, and how we ever knew it, I don't know." "Knew what?" "Why, that you were a good wife," replied Bob. "Everyone knows that, said Peter. "Very well observed, my boy," cried Bob. "I hope they do. Heartily sorry," he said, "for your good wife. If I can be of service to you in any way," he said, giving me his card, "that's where I live. Pray come to me." "Now, it wasn't," cried Bob, "for for the sake of anything that he might be able to do for us, so kind as his kind way. It was quite delightful. It really seemed as if he had known our Tiny Tim and felt with us. I'm sure he's a good soul, said Mrs. Cratchit. You'll be sure of it, my dear, returned Bob. If you saw and spoke to him, I shouldn't be at all surprised. Mark by what I say, if he got Peter a better situation. Only hear that, Peter, Mrs. Cratchit. And then, cried one of the girls, Peter will be keeping company with someone, and setting up for himself. Get along with you, retorted Peter, grinning. It's just as likely as not, said Bob. One of these days, as there's plenty of time for that, my dear. But however and whatever, or whenever, we part from one another, I'm sure that none of us will forget poor Tiny Tim, shall we? Or this first parting that there was among us. Never, father, cried all. And I know, said Bob, I know, my dears, that when we recollect how patient and how mild he was, although he is a little child, we shall not quarrel easily among ourselves, and forget poor Tiny Tim in doing it. No, never, father, they all cried again. I am very happy, said little Bob. I am very happy. Miss Cratchit kissed him, and all the daughters kissed him, and the two young Cratchits kissed him, and Peter and himself shook hands. Spirit of Tiny Tim, thy childish essence was from God. Spectre, said Scrooge, something informs me that our parting moment is at hand. I know it, and I know not how. Tell me what man that was whom we saw lying. The ghost of Christmas yet to come conveyed him. As before, though at a different time, he thought, indeed. There seemed no order in these later visions, save that they are from the future. Into resorts of a businessman, but showed him not himself, indeed. The spirit did not stay for anything, but went straight on, as to the end just now desired, until besought by Scrooge to tarry for a moment. This course, said Scrooge, though we hurry now, is where my place of occupation is, and has been for a length of time. I see the house, let me behold it, what I shall be in days to come. The spirit stopped, the hand was pointed elsewhere. The house is yonder, Scrooge exclaimed. Why do you point away? The example finger underwent no change. Scrooge hastened to the window of his office and looked in. It was the office still, but not his. The furniture was not the same, and the figure in the chair was not himself. The phantom pointed as before. He joined it once again, wondering why and whither he had gone, accompanied it until they reached an iron gate. He paused to look around before entering. A churchyard here, then, the wretched man whose name he had now to learn, lay underneath the ground. It was a worthy place, walled in by houses, overrun by grass and weeds. The growth of vegetation's death, not life, choked up, with too much burying, fat with repleted appetite, a worthy place. The spirit stood among the graves and pointed down to one. He advanced towards it, trembling. The phantom was exactly as it had been, but he dreaded when he saw a new meaning in its solemn shape. Before I draw nearer to that stone to which you point, said Scrooge, answer me one question. Are these the shadows of things that will be, or are they shadows of things that may be only? The ghost pointed downward to the grave by which it stood. Men's courses will foreshadow certain ends, to which, if preserved, they must lead, said Scrooge. But if the courses be departed from, the ends will change. Say it is thus with what you show me. The spirit was immovable as ever. Scrooge crept towards it, trembling as he went, and following the finger, read upon the stone the neglected grave of his own name, Ebenezer Scrooge. Am I that man who lay upon the bed? He cried, upon his knees. The finger pointed from the grave to him, and back again. Oh, spirit, oh no. The finger still was there. Spirit, he cried, tight clutching at his robe. Hear me, I am not the man I was. I will not be the man I must have been for this intercourse. Why show me this, if I am past all hope? For the first time the hand appeared to shake. Good spirit, he pursued, as down upon the ground he fell before it. Your nature intercedes me and pities me. Assure me that I am yet to change these shadows you have shown me by an altered life. The kind hand trembled. I will honor Christmas in my heart and try to keep it all in the year, and live in the present, the past, the present, and the future, and the spirits of all three shall strive within me. I will not shut out the lessons that they teach. Oh, tell me I may sponge away the writing on this stone. In his agony he caught the spectral hand. It sought to free itself, but he was strong in his entreaty and detained it. The spirit, stronger yet, repulsed him. Holding his hands in a last prayer, to have his fate reversed, he saw an alteration in the phantom's hood and dress. It shrunk, collapsed, and dwindled down into the bedpost. Wow. Well, that was a rather short story in which I'm a bit tired, and for some reason I just kept messing up words, but I thank each and every one of you for coming. And that was A Christmas Carol Stave 4. Now, I'll do a little bit of ASMR now. Don't know what I'll do, but it'll certainly be something. Let me go pause the... Ooh, what music is it? Okay. Go back to here. Change title. ASMR. Oh, hi Molag. Welcome in. I just changed it to general ASMR, but I thank you very much for coming. And if you want to start off your day with some nice ASMR, feel free to just type in the redeem you want me to do and I'll do it. Okay? On a side note, I could also read... Oh, headbands. Okay. On a side note, I'm going to do proper ASMR for a bit, and I'll go back to doing Stave 5 because it doesn't seem too long. But I have these headbands, Moag. Oh, thank you, Moag. Thank you. It's always nice to hear that people enjoy me. But just take these nice headbands. Okay. And feel free to just type in any redeem you want, because right now I'm doing all free, at least ones that triggers, that is. So you can just sit here and enjoy me. can just enjoy my voice. Enjoy the ASMR of the headbands. Now let me tell you, your day is going to be absolutely magical, okay? I have my little bell right here. I have my little bell. And you can flick it all you want. Okay? You can enjoy my little bell, playing with it, having fun. But for now, I will tell you the truth. You're going to have a wonderful day. There may be some things that won't be the greatest, but you will have a good day. Just had to find the greatness within it. Whether it's seeing people go on their day by day, having fun, laughing, being merry, and many other things. There will be certain things that you will enjoy, and that will make it all great. Gotta do a bit of stretching, you know. Boag, darling, if you're still there, would you like me to go on with the 5th stave of the book? It's surprisingly very short. I can probably read it in 20 minutes. And if you're like hearing my voice, you can just type in 1 or yes in chat. It shouldn't be too hard. Fun. Let me just go modify title. It's only about 10-15 paragraphs, so I should be able to read it quite well. Okay, ASMR. Stave 5. There. A Christmas Carol, Stave 5. There we go. Stave 5. The end of it. Yes, and the bedpost was his own. And the bed was his own, and the room was his own, the best and happiest of all. The time was before him, was his own, to make amends in it. I will live in the past, and the present, and the future, Scrooge repeated, as he scrambled out of bed. The spirits of all three shall thrive within me. O Jacob Marley, heaven and the Christmas time will be praised for this. I sat it on my knees, old Jacob on my knees. He was so fluttered and so glowing with good intentions that his broken voice would scarcely answer to his call. He had been sobbing violently in conflict with the spirit, and his face was wet with tears. Oh, and I forgot to resume this. There. Hopefully it isn't too disturbing. They were not torn down, replied Scrooge, folding one of his bed curtains in his arm, and they're not torn down, rings and all. They are here, I am here. The shadow of the things that would have been may be dispelled. They will be, I know they will. His hands were busy in his garments all this time, turning them inside out, putting them in upside down, tearing them, mislaying them, making them parties to every kind of extravagance. I don't know what to do, cried Scrooge, laughing and crying in the same breath, and making a perfect Laocoon of himself with his stockings. I am as light as a feather, I am as happy as an angel. I am as merry as a schoolboy, and I am as giddy as a drunken man. There. Oh, drunk. A Merry Christmas to everybody, a Happy New Year to all the world. Hallo here, whoop. He had frisked into the sitting room and was now standing there, perfectly winded. There's the saucepan that the gruel was in, cried Scrooge, starting off again and going round the fireplace. There's the door by which the ghost of Jacob Marley entered. There's a corner where the ghost of Christmas present sat. There's a window where I saw the wandering spirits. It's all right. It's all true. It all happened. Really, for a man who had been out of practice for so many years, it was a splendid laugh, a most illustrious laugh, the father of a long, brilliant laugh. I don't know what day of the month it is, said Scrooge. I don't know how long. It's not pouring out as well as I'd like. I don't know how long I've been among the spirits. I don't know anything. I'm quite a baby. Never mind. Ooh, I don't care. I'd rather be a baby. Hallo here. He had checked in his transports by the churches, ringing out the lustiest peals he had ever heard. Clash, clang, hammer, ding, dong, bell, ding, ding, or dong, ding, hammer, clang, clash. Oh, glorious, glorious. Running to the window, he opened it, and put out by his stirring, cold, piping for the blood to dance. Golden sunlight, heavenly sky, sweet fresh air, merry bells, oh, glorious, glorious. What's today? Cried Scrooge, calling downward to a boy in Sunday clothes, who perhaps loitered in to look about him. Eh? Returned the boy, with all his might wonder. I had to go back to here and scroll down. There. What's today, my merry fellow? Said Scrooge. Today? The boy replied. Why, Christmas Day. It's Christmas Day, said Scrooge to himself. I haven't missed it. Spirits have done it all in one night. They can do anything they like. Of course they can. Of course they can. Hallo, my fine fellow. Hallo, returned the boy. Do you know the poulterers in the street but one, in the next street but one at the corner? Scrooge inquired. I should hope I did. An intelligent boy, returned Scrooge. A remarkable boy. Do you know whether they sold the prize turkey that was hanging up there? Not the little prize turkey, the big one. What? The one as big as me? Ah, what a delightful boy, said Scrooge. It's a pleasure to talk to him. Yes, my buck. It's hanging there now, replied the boy. Is it? Said Scrooge. Go and buy it. Walker? Exclaimed the boy. No, I am in earnest. Go and buy it and tell them to bring it here, and I may give them the direction to where to take it. Come back with the man, I'll give you a shilling. Come back with him in less than 5 minutes, I'll give you half a crown. And I'll send it to Bob Cratchit's, whispered Scrooge, rubbing his hands and splitting with a laugh. You shan't know who sends it. It's twice the size of Tiny Tim. Joe Miller never made such a joke as sending it to Bob's will be. The hand in which he wrote the address was not a steady one, but right as he did, somehow, went downstairs to open the street door, ready for the coming of the poulterer's man, as he sighed. "I shall love it, as long as I live," cried Scrooge, patting it with his hand. I scarcely ever looked at it before. What an odd expression it has on its face. It's a wonderful knocker. Here's the turkey. Hallo, whoop, how are you? Merry Christmas. It was a turkey. He could have never stood upon his legs, that bird. He would have snapped them off in a short minute like sticks of sealing wax. "Why, it was impossible to carry that to Camden Town," said Scrooge. "You must have had a cab." The chuckle with which he had said this, and the chuckle with which he paid for the turkey, and the chuckle for which he paid for the cab, and the chuckle for which he recompensed the boy, were only to be exceeded by the chuckle with which he sat down breathless in his chair again, and chuckled till he cried. Shaving was not an easy task, for his hand continued to shake very much, and shaving requires attention, even when you don't dance while you're at it. But if he had cut the end of his nose off, he would have put a piece of sticking plaster over it, and have been quite satisfied. He dressed himself all in his best, and at last got out into the streets, where people by this time pouring forth as he had seen them, engrossed the Christmas present, and walking with his hands behind him. Scrooge regarded every one with a delightful smile. He looked so irresistibly pleasant, in a word, that 3 or 4 good-humored fellows said, "Good morning, sir, Merry Christmas to you." And Scrooge had said often afterwards that of all the bliff sounds he had ever heard, those were the bliffiest of his ears. He had not gone far, when coming on towards him he beheld the portly gentleman who had walked to his counting-house the day before, and said, "Scrooge and Marley's, I believe." It sent a pang across his heart to know how his old gentleman would look upon him when they met, but he knew that pathway straight before him, and he took it. "My dear sir," said Scrooge, quickening his pace and taking the old gentleman by both his hands, "how do you do? I hope you succeeded yesterday. It was very kind of you. And Merry Christmas to you, sir." "Mr. Scrooge?" "Yes," said Mr. Scrooge, "that's my name, and I fear it may not be pleasant to you. Allow me to ask your pardon. Will you have the forgiveness, or the goodness—" "Here," Scrooge whispered in his ear. "Lord bless me," cried the gentleman, as if his breath were gone. "My dear Scrooge, are you serious?" "If you please," said Scrooge. "Not a farthing less. A great many back payments are included in it, I assure you. Will you do me that favor?" "My dear sir," said the other, shaking hands with him, "I know what to say in such a munifi—" "Don't say anything, please," retorted Scrooge. "Come and see me. Will you come and see me?" "I will," cried the old gentleman, and it was clear he meant to do it. "Thank you," said Scrooge. "I am much obliged to you, and I thank you 50 times. Bless you." He went to church and walked about the streets, and watched the people hurrying to and fro, patted children on the head and questioned beggars, and looked down into the kitchens of houses and up to the windows, and found that everything could yield him pleasure. He had never dreamed that any walk, that anything, could give him such happiness. In the afternoon he turned his steps towards his nephew's house. He passed the door a dozen times, and before he had the courage to go up and knock, he made a dash and did it. "Is your master at home, my dear?" said Scrooge to the little girl. Or to the girl. "Very nice." "Very." "Yes, sir. Where is he, my love?" said Scrooge. "He's in the dining room, sir, along with the mistress." "I shall show you upstairs, if you please." "Thank you." He knows me, and with his hand already in the dining room lock. "I'll go in here, my dear." He turned gently and sidled his face in round the door. They were looking at the table, which was spread out in gray array, for these young housekeepers are always nervous on such points, and like to see that everything is right. "Fred," said Scrooge. Dear heart alive, how his niece by marriage startled. Scrooge had forgotten for the moment about her sitting in the corner on the footstool, and he wouldn't have done it on any account. "Why, bless my soul," cried Fred, "who is that?" "It's I, your Uncle Scrooge. I've come to dinner. Will you let me in, Fred?" "Let him in. It's a mercy that I didn't shake his arm off. He was at home in 5 minutes, and nothing could be heartier. His niece looked at just at the same time. So did Topper when he came. So did the plump sister when she came. So did everyone when they came. Wonderful party, wonderful games, wonderful unanimity, wonderful happiness. But he was early at the office next morning. Oh, he was early there. If he could only be there first and catch Bob Cratchit coming late. That was the thing he had set his heart upon. And he did it. Yes, he did it. The clock struck 9. No Bob. 1/4 past. No Bob. He was 8 full minutes and a half behind his time. Scrooge sat with his door wide open, and they might see him come into the tank. His hat was off before he opened the door, his comforter too. He was on a stool in a jiffy, driving away his pen, as if he were trying to overtake 9 o'clock. "Hello," growled Scrooge in his accustomed voice, as near he could feign it. "What do you mean by coming here at this time of day?" "I'm very sorry, sir," said Bob. "I'm behind my time." "You are," repeated Scrooge. "Yes, I think you are. Step this way, if you please." "It's only once a year, sir," pleaded Bob, appearing from the tank. "It shall not be repeated. I was making rather merry yesterday, sir. Now, I will tell you what, my friend. I'm not going to let this stand, this sort of thing any longer." And thereafter, he continued, leaping from his stool and giving Bob such a dig in the waistcoat that he staggered back into the tank again. "And therefore I am about to raise your salary." Bob trembled and got a little nearer to the lure. He had a momentary idea of knocking Scrooge down with it, holding him and calling for the people of court to help in strait waistcoat. "A Merry Christmas," said Bob, said Scrooge with an earnestness that could not be mistaken as he clapped him on the back. "A Merry Christmas, Bob, my good fellow, that I have given you for many a year. I'll raise your salary and endeavor to assist your struggling family, and we will discuss your fares this very afternoon, over a Christmas bowl of smoking bishop. Bob, make it up with fires and buy another coal scuttle before you dot another I, Bob Cratchit." Scrooge was better than his word. He did it all and infinitely more. And to Tiny Tim, who would not die, he was a second father. He became as good as a friend, as good as a master, and as good as a man, as a good old city knew, and any other good old city, town, or borough in the good old world. Some people laughed to see the alteration in him, but he did not let them laugh, and little heeded them, for he was wise enough to know that nothing ever happened on this globe for good at which some people did not have their fill of laughter in the onset, knowing that such as these would be blind anyway, that he thought it was quite as well, and they should wrinkle up their eyes and grins, and have the malady in less attractive forms. His own heart laughed, and that is quite enough for him. He had no further intercourse with spirits, but lived upon the total abstinence principle. Even afterwards, and it was always said of him that he knew how to keep Christmas well. If any man alive possessed knowledge, may that truly be said of us and all of us. And so, as Tiny Tim observed, God bless everyone. And that was A Christmas Carol, Stave 4 and 5. If you do excuse me, darling, I think that'll be it for today. So, to those of you still listening, may you have a beautiful and wonderful day. And Molag, as a question, did you enjoy the jazz playing in the background, or was it a bit too off-putting? I'll pause it for now. So, no to the jazz, or yes? You liked it? Okay. Do you think Christmas music of some form would have been better? Thinking about it now, I think so too, but that's alright for now. Oh, I wonder what other songs are here. Oh, country. No. Sorry. I don't like country. Feel free to cancel me. Anyway. Bye bye everyone. Do have a wonderful time. And if you want to check out anything else by me, you can go to my socials, see my very, very questionable content, whether that be on Twitter or really anything. Do have a wonderful time. For some reason my commands aren't working. And